All right, guys, let's talk about Bible camp. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, um, oh gosh. So back in high school, I think I was pretty much in high school most of these times. Uh, I think so the school I went to was a junior academy, meaning it's almost like how they say junior college. It doesn't go, you can't get your bachelor's out of it. Like you can't get your high school diploma out of a junior high school. Um, excuse me. It went up to 10th grade. Now it doesn't go up to that grade. It was an Adventist school. Um, but I wanted to talk about Bible camps and my experiences with them. I don't even know if they still do them or if they still send kids. But if people want to know, like the Adventist community, it has a camp in Angeles Oaks, California. It's up in the mountains in the like up in I think it's technically San Bernardino County. Um, but it's up in the Angeles Forest. And I know it's off Angeles Oaks. It's called Camp Cedar Falls. I don't know if that's even still the name, but I think the area is called Angeles Oaks, or the main highway it's on. That's the name of it. It's somewhere in the address, Angeles Oaks. And this camp, it's a summer camp. They have cabins. You can go in the winters too. You can rent out the cabins. They have a full kitchen, like cafeteria style. So people have jobs where they're working either as like the staff nurse or different counselors or maintenance people, or there's different roles that people have as staff. When I went, my folks and some family friends who are adults, they made soccer and basketball camp, which that camp did not have before. I don't know if they still have it, but they did make soccer and basketball camp. And otherwise, they had summer camp where you could be in like arts and crafts or swimming or horseback riding or archery or like a different focus, or you could do like the general camp where you got like a little flavor. You'd have like a rotation throughout the day. Now, this was just normal camp. Like, you could go summers. This was mostly summer camp. You'd stay for like a week usually. So you get like the church experiences. You do roll call every day where they do mail. You do, I don't know if we did the Pledge of Allegiance or what. I think we did that as well as like a prayer a couple times a day. And they had this like fire pit. It was kind of like an outdoor, they called it the fireball, and it was kind of like an outdoor like stadium seating style with like these concrete like stadium seats. But it was a small, like, think of like a campfire, but like with like seating that went up like that, like in a small, it looked like a small little stadium, but it was close enough that people could play acoustic guitars and like you could hear the people singing, and then you could hear the person speaking. Like usually things were mic'd up, but I remember going. I had fun. I used to have some camp counselors that I kind of, looking back, I kind of had crushes on them, but I don't think I really knew that's what that was back then. I was just kind of like, I just really want to play soccer, and somehow she lets me play her guitar, and this is fun. Like that's all I really cared about. I wasn't really like caring too much about other than like sports and stuff. But basically, um, we went and had a lot of like our schools, like once you're in, I think maybe it was like 7th, 8th grade, ninth, 10th grade, maybe around those grades, because some of the other schools didn't go all the way to high school. And so the ones of us that didn't have high school all the way through to senior year, we kind of treated 7th and 8th grade as like freshman, sophomore almost. It's like there'd be a little bit of hazing and a little bit of mild bullying. I never really saw anything like too, but they'd be like, oh, like the 7th graders stink, or like they get the lockers that are like lower, and like or like you get the lockers in the back or something like they kind of make it like a little inconvenient, but it was never like I never noticed any like full on like bullying, but like the teachers were a little stricter on like the seventh graders because they were kind of just coming out of like elementary school. So those junior high school years for a lot of us, we didn't consider 6, 7, 8 as junior high, and then 9, 10, 11, 12 as high school. It was there was like this weird overlap where like 7, 8, 9, 10 was almost considered high school because you were like the oldest kids in the whole school, and the school only went up to 10th grade. Then you transfer and go to another high school. So I almost felt like the experience of being a senior kind of twice, you know. And you know, it was, I don't know, looking back, I really did, there was a lot that I didn't like about church stuff, but it was mostly just the gossip and the you know, I don't know, there were just certain dynamics socially that just weren't very healthy, but I wouldn't say it was all unhealthy. Like, there was enough that was, like, really good. The camps were kind of fun, but mostly when I went, I wanted to play sports, so when they made us go do crafts or go to the pool and stuff like that, like, usually the soccer kids were like, we don't want to do this, we just want to play soccer all day, like, what are you doing? Like, so we'd be all, like, upset, like, oh, we gotta go do go-karts, and, like, I just want to play soccer, like, I don't want to go do this. And so, but that was summer, so the same camp was used for Bible camps, and a lot of those Bible camps were held in winter, and I think it was grades 7 through 10 that would go. I feel like that's the grades, because I feel like if it was only ninth and 10th, there would have been like 10 kids. Like, I feel like, because we didn't have a lot of ninth and 10th graders. Like, my 10th grade class, I think there were 5 of us. Like, it wasn't a big school at all. And now it only goes up to ninth grade, I think. Or 8th grade. I think it doesn't have any high school grades. So back then, they would send kids to, like, basically you'd have to, like, pay. Maybe there were almost always fundraisers for stuff, like brownie sales, like parts of the, like, snack sales would go towards certain stuff, or we do, like, car washes on the weekends at Sports League on Sundays. We do car washes and, like, make breakfast burritos or sell pies. We'd make and sell pies. So we'd do these different things during the school, during the weekend, and then it would, whoever attended, the money would go partially towards fees to pay for trips, like mission trips to Mexico, or like any kind of out of town trip, like a camp, like a Bible camp thing. It's like we'd have, like, so our parents were coming out of pocket, but we kind of had ways where we could kind of, they would provide us ways to kind of work a little bit to kind of like make some extra money through kind of like volunteering through the school, usually like bake sale type stuff. Like, you're basically like either part of the making experience or part of the selling experience or providing like a service. And we would kind of do that, and you know, you kind of like work your way, work off part of the bill. I think once we sold these band-aids that had like Jesus stickers, Jesus, like they had like crosses and that fish, which I don't want to argue about all the symbolism, but basically we had these like, it's funny, I was looking at my class ring the other day, my 2002 high school graduation class ring, and it has like a little cross with like an open Bible, and it has like a Leo lion, and it has that fish on it, and I was like, oh, that's right. Like, back then I was like hardcore in the church. Like, I forgot, like, because I was like, I wonder, I forgot what I had put on my ring, and I looked at it because I was like cleaning everything in my room and like dusting things off, and I was like, I forgot that because you could choose what goes on the sides of your ring, and then the signature and the stone, and like if there's kind of some picture inside the stone. Shout out Jostens. But basically, yeah, I still have my class ring. I don't think it fits. I didn't want to put it all the way on because I was like, well, I might not be able to get it off, and I really don't want to wear that thing, but I used to wear it around. I used to wear it sometimes. But yeah, I remember these Bible camps we would go, and it would be like other local Adventist schools. So I remember it was like San Antonio Junior Academy. We called them Saja. We were SBJA. There was another school that was for South Bay Junior Academy. I don't know if that's still the name. I don't remember if Glendale Academy went. I think there were a few other ones, but I only remember Saja because I remember they had some kids that were really gifted in like basketball and like kind of like gospel singing, and I was like, I really like them. You know, they're really cool, and they had like other black students, and I was like, we don't really have a lot of black students, so I kind of took a liking to some of these schools. San Antonio, I think San Antonio. No, that was the same one. Is that the same one? I don't know. There were a couple brothers that were really into like pop locking and stuff like that. But yeah, that those were kind of I kind of met some of the black students from other Adventist schools because ours didn't really have a lot of black students. I was like one of the few black students, and so yeah, I remember kind of gravitating more towards like the musical and uh, like athletic students. We'd almost always play like basketball and stuff, and it would be like snowing outside and like ice on the basketball court and stuff. But it was winter. It was cold. They have a bear there called Taboo. I don't know how many bears they've had named Taboo, but they capture a bear every so often, and I think the original one did pass away, but I think they still have another bear that they named Taboo. So whenever we'd go in the winter, it would be hibernating, so we never really saw it. But during the summer, it would be out, like in its big cage thing, and I don't know why they captured that bear, but um, now that I think of it, I'm like, wow, it's kind of dark. But yeah, we'd have these Bible camps. So basically, if you could pay to go, the school provided these Bible camps. But there was this other Bible camp that they had that, like, I think I've talked about it before. They didn't invite everybody. They invited select students, a couple from each of the upper grades, who I guess the teacher said they invited the students that were like influential. But the rest of us who didn't get invited were like, oh, we're not good enough, we're not holy enough for them, and so like we kind of took offense to this because like they were definitely picking and choosing who got to go to this camp, this separate kind of camp. It was like some of the kids from every school were chosen to go to this camp to basically kind of get them on this like on this spiritual high, which did happen, and then they went back to their schools and just kind of lit those schools on fire with their spiritual high and all that. And I'm not knocking it because it was I'm just thinking about my experience with that because I didn't go to that Bible camp. They had a second one after that where they invited like everybody. It was like a prayer camp or something. And I started getting really into prayer back then, like noticing things about like when you were praying for a really long time is different than your like mealtime prayer or your like morning devotion or like your evening kind of prayer reflection, however you do it, if you do it or don't, whatever. But however that looks, it's different when you're just doing it with all these other people. It's different in groups, and it's kind of, I don't know. Do I even want to go into this? I don't know. Like I guess one thing I guess is maybe a this might be a grudge that I hold after being, trained more in psychology um, as like a career path. After dealing with that more, I think I kind of was awakened to more of the issues that came with the kind of toxic environments that these churches kind of allowed. And I think the main thing is kind of like when it comes to confidentiality and things like that, they never really were strict with that kind of stuff. And that was something that I just never thought was right. I knew something was up wrong with that, but it was like they would tend to get people in these like prayer groups, prayer circles, close knit community groups of people to where people would be. It's almost like group therapy in a way, but not really. It was kind of like a usually it would start with some biblical topic, like we're here for a Bible study or whatever. But it's like if you're around the same 5 or 6 people where you're in somebody's house, you're in like an assistant pastor's house, or like a deaconess, you're in her house and her husband's an assistant pastor and they've got their kids and they're welcoming you into their house every single Tuesday. You're eating dinner with these people and their families. You get to see their kids having tantrums. You get to see them having little, maybe disagreements as spouses, or like you get to see them laughing together. You get to see, like, you see these families and they welcome you into their home. It kind of becomes this little, like, it's not like you're in the church. It's like, yeah, you have these relationships with people outside of the church that are a lot more intimate relationships, and you're kind of closer with people on a level where it's like, well, the 6 of us who are hanging out at this house for like 2 or 3 years, every every single Tuesday that we're meeting up and like building these closer bonds. If somebody goes outside of the group and is like, oh, well, we were having this prayer group and so was like in tears about something, and this other person on this other day was like talking about this other thing that they had going on, and they would just take things and like spread it to other people that weren't really part of that group. That's kind of what I noticed when I say that, like, the gossip and like all the judgment and stuff. I think that's where it comes from. That's where I would see it. Is like, I would kind of know better that, like, okay, this stuff is like between us here, but then other people would kind of take what would maybe happen in like a smaller group of people, and after everyone's like closer and trusting each other more and stuff, people are, people have their walls down. They're kind of more open to share about things, which I think is healthy, but they didn't ever really create like a healthy space or like understanding that, like, are we all on the same page, that when we're in these groups and we're having these conversations and sharing time together and talking about certain stuff, it doesn't leave this room. It's like there was never a conversation like that. And so I think people took it and ran. They took advantage of the fact that nobody was cracking down on it. And I would, because at times they would let me do Sabbath school lessons, or like Friday night like Vespers lessons, or like some stuff at church where I had some random leadership positions in college. um, and I would kind of mention certain stuff where I was like, this isn't cool, but it's like, who am I? Nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to listen to that. And like, we weren't like at a place in society back then either where I was even involved in mental health too much at all, like barely, just through my major a little bit. It was my early days of being in psychology, which means it was all theoretical, and back then I was mostly doing statistics. It was like cognitive science stuff. It wasn't really like therapeutic, like, psychoanalytic type stuff at all. Like, it was basically statistics research. So I remember my experiences with that and being like, I kind of learned. I was like, you cannot trust these people, because I see the way they talk about each other, and they talk crap about each other. And I know people get insecure and they start talking crap about each other. It's fine. And it's fine. Naturally, humans are going to vent. I think it's natural. It's normal. But I think there was never enough conversation around, like, look, when you guys are having these prayer groups, you can't go gossiping all over the church about it, Like, I kind of saw a lot of that. And, there wasn't a lot of conversation around, like, trying to crack down on it. And I think a lot of people my generation kind of saw that and were like, yeah, this is disgusting. And but yeah, so I kind of started noticing that kind of stuff. But then when it came to Bible camp, um, that camp, the first one where they invited only like a select amount of people, um, for whatever reason they had, I guess somebody thought it would be a good idea just to just to invite a few. And they had these, it was the teachers, some teachers made this decision to send certain students. It was usually like the pastor's kids, kind of some more outspoken kids. I remember there was a guy who was like a good friend of mine, Muslim. It wasn't a Muslim school, it was an Adventist Christian school, but this Muslim guy who was just really nice and sweet, he got invited. Um, there may have been like, I think there were like 3 to 6 people that got invited, but they all came back like on fire for God and just completely like different. Like I was like, who are these people? Like the way we joked around was different. They were very glowy and happy, and like I was just like, how'd they get so happy? And I was in high school, so I was like, I was not happy. I was moody, and like I was just like, I want to be happy like them. And so I started kind of trying to do what I noticed them doing. I'm like, they pray a lot. They learned this Acts prayer. Um, it stood for something. It was like an acronym. I can't remember what it was. Um, I think the last one was supplication for the S, ACTS. It was, I think, adoration, consecration. I don't know, or confession. I don't know which one. Um, Thankfulness and supplication or something like that. Like I don't know. But I don't know if it was based on Ellen G. White's not Desire Pages, Steps to Christ book. Her book talks a lot about prayer. Um, but yeah, I don't really remember what it was, but it was basically this book about that. And then not a book. Sorry, I'm thinking about the book of it. Yeah, Ellen G. White's book is about. It kind of has these different topics about prayer and stuff. Um, and then, so I don't know if that Acts prayer is based on her book or if it's some other thing, or if it's based on the book of Acts in the Bible. I have no idea. Like I just know it was called the Acts prayer, and that was what the acronym stood for. I don't remember all the details, but that's about as far as I remember. And then, like, so some things that I noticed that had changed is like these kids were more like the ones who went to the camp when they came back. I don't want to say this in a mean way, but they experienced some kind of brainwashing. Not okay. That's maybe that's not fair. Like I don't know what to call it though. I think it would be similar to any spiritual retreat when you would go and you come back and like your perspective on life is completely different because you've been immersed in an environment that helps you to change your mindset, and it stuck with them for a long time. And they were very open to sharing their newfound excitement about religion with everybody. And I don't know if they were brainwashed. Let me say I don't know, because it was the indoctrination period. I don't know how they were indoctrinated, but I saw it a lot in their actions. It wasn't so much in like how they spoke about the Bible, or like were they talking about different things than usual. I don't think I noticed that. I think what I noticed was people were more likely to talk about I don't know. Okay, so I'm trying to think of specific examples. Like they were really smiley and like just really like they found a way to kind of be joyful in their conversations. So and then like they weren't using profanity. I mean, a lot of us weren't, but we just wouldn't do it around teachers. But they weren't using profanity. They weren't talking like in an egotistical way about anything. They're very like uplifting towards people. There was like zero sarcasm. Um, they're really like they were acting nice, you know, kind of like trying to like uphold this type of purity in like their conversations and like what they did for hobbies, and they would kind of share about it more. So I did have a friend that, you know, we were into all kinds of music and stuff, and I remember he said that sometime during that time period after he shared with some of us that he had smashed his Slipknot album, and I was like, wow, like this is somebody that I really respected growing up. Like, you know, like our parents used to bathe us together. Like we go back to like childhood, back when we were like little kids, like little kids, like 4 or 5 years old, little kids. And I still know this person, but that's how far back we go. And that's one reason why this Adventist stuff is really like one of the things that for me I don't easily just shake it off. Where I'm like, okay, like maybe I don't really believe all this, but you know, it's culturally still part of who I am. Like I still associate with these people. I still, you know, talk to some. It's like, oh, church is over. Let me see who wants to hang or who wants to chat. You know, it's like, especially when I'm in LA, I know a lot of Adventists, and it's like that's just my life. So I'm trying to figure that out. Um, I'm trying, you know, to figure that out these days. But um, yeah, that experience was really weird for me. Like it was weird to have friends that were like more sticking up for what they actually believe. They were more defined in their beliefs. I'd say there was some jealousy there. I definitely felt some jealousy at some point where I was just like, why didn't I get chosen? Like, I study the Bible, I volunteer for the church. Like, why didn't they choose me, you know? Like, and it, you know, it got back to some of the teachers, and I think some of the teachers kind of checked themselves and they were like, maybe we made a mistake. Like, not that they shouldn't have chosen those people, but that they shouldn't have excluded other people. Um, I guess they didn't think that we would get upset about it, but a lot of people were upset. I don't remember if I was upset or not, but I remember it being bad. I remember, and at first it was like, who are these people? Their personalities are completely different, you know? And at first I was like, okay, it's gonna wear off. And then it didn't. It didn't wear off. I think it lasted like a whole school year, maybe even 2 school years. It lasted a long time. I was like, wow, I didn't expect it to last this long, but they got a fire lit under them in some kind of way, and it did definitely spread to a point where I remember, okay, we went to one of these school related Bible camps at one point. This specifically stood out to me because I remember, you know, I was really into music and all that kind of stuff, and then a lot of the things that these were close friends of mine. Like I'm saying, some of these people I knew since I was 4 or 5 years old. We spent a lot of time together. Our parents would babysit each other. We would carpool every day and together. Like I knew kind of where their parents stood. They knew where I stood. We all kind of knew where one another stood on different things. And our parents would allow one another to like socialize and stuff. And yeah, it was kind of a little shocked, you know, as to, you know, I was a little surprised, you know, with some stuff, you know, like it's really hard to describe. Like this is like really hard to kind of explain. I didn't think it would be, but it's kind of hard to try to explain because I respect a lot of it. I do. Like it's just kind of like a weird way I can kind of like zoom into it and then zoom out of it and just be like, no, and then some stuff I'm like, okay, yes. So I kind of see it from a lot of angles. But I remember this one of these winter Bible camps where like it was school related and all these different like Adventist schools could go. And mind you, it wasn't like massive amounts of people. Let's call it like probably like 70 kids, maybe 70 kids total. Because it wasn't 200, it wasn't like 100 something. It was probably like under 100 kids. Because I remember the room we were in, we would use the nature room for our meetings at Camp Cedar Falls. There's like this nature room, and we'd either sit on the floor in circles or the chairs would be set up, and we would have like these larger meetings with all the kids from all the schools. Um, so we basically had like church every day. It was like a week of prayer or something like that. I don't know what it was. Like this is so long ago, guys. I don't even know what was called what, but it was, let's call it week of prayer. It was a week of prayer, but with other schools. We all combined, and I think we did this every year, 7, 8, 9, 10, I want to say. But I think other schools had high school. The schools that had high schools, I want to say they had 11th and 12th grade too. Um, who came? So I remember our school. It wasn't our whole school. It was just like the upper grades. So let's say there were like 15 of us. I don't know. That sounds about right. 15, 20 of us. Each school probably had like 15, 20 people. Kids, like they all had like a bunch of chaperones, but counting the kids, I want to say they each had 15 to 20 people come up. And these were like kids who could afford the trip. It wasn't like based on some kind of selection process other than that. And some people couldn't afford it or didn't want to go or they had other obligations, so they couldn't go up. And maybe it wasn't a whole week. Maybe it was like Friday to Monday or something. I don't remember, but I remember we were there for a while, multiple nights, probably half a week or a week. And I think we did these every year in the winter. I really can't remember because we did so much stuff. Like, there's some places where we went so many times a year that it just all blends together. But I remember going to this camp in our group, after these other kids had come back, and this was some months after. It was like some months after they had come back. It wasn't like a week later. This was like months and months later, after we'd been, introduced to their way of like how they were trained in that Bible camp that those chosen kids got to go to. A lot of their kind of thinking and ways of looking at religion and spiritual practices and traditions and things rubbed off on a lot of us, myself included. So I remember sometimes I would be like, okay, like I don't want to use profanity anymore, or I would always be like talking about like all kinds of topics at school, like about like what I would watch on BET, mostly that kind of stuff, like hip hop videos, pretty much the content of those videos, like drugs, violence, gangs, money, cars, things like I don't think hip hop's all about that. It's propaganda, but I know hip hop is completely about other things too. But what you see in the mainstream media is totally just like flashing money and all that. And one rapper did say this. He was saying like that's all that they will let you see is like the stupid black man, the ignorant, gangsta person. I personally think a lot of rappers and hip hop artists are geniuses. If you listen to these guys talk, the level that they have, the command they have over the English language, and just their creativity around, they're complete poets. Completely. I mean, even like Master P and those kind of, like, just listen to them in their interviews talking. Tupac, when you just listen to these people talk, you're like, they've got a type of intelligence that the average American does not have. But yet, the way they look on the screen and the stuff that they are allowed to glorify, is not, is not, it's not full spectrum. It's just like a small snippet that they're allowed to promote. And I guess we saw more about that when Eminem came on the scene. and his interactions with the federal government and all that kind of stuff, with how he was influencing suburbia, you know, because now you have another group of people tuning into this type of music because they have like some kind of blonde hair, blue eyed looking guy, I don't know. I don't want to. I do want to talk about that, but this isn't. I'm not trying to go way off on the tangent. But basically, I don't know. It's all propaganda. But anyways, we'll just leave it at that. So basically, but yeah, I used to really glorify that kind of stuff because I was like, well, this is the only place where I see any representation of any dark-skinned people that look like me. So I didn't know that like that wasn't. Like, I was like, I'm not like a Cosby person or like a Family Matters family with these like two-story houses and this kind of like, dare I say, like whitewashed kind of like no culture representative of African or African American or black anything. It's just like we just are a different color, but everything seems like we're white. You wouldn't know the difference because topics don't come up that would be like similar to like what things come up in black households and things like that. Like it was very like a lot of the media that had black people in it was very whitewashed. And back then they used to have, I'm not saying that black people aren't like, I don't know, there are a lot of black people that are in like white culture and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying like if you're a black person, even if you do live in a white culture, oftentimes inside your household you're black and you talk a certain, not like in an accent or whatever, but the conversations you might be having around what happens in your day to day and what happened at work and what happened in your life when you're dealing with other types of Americans. You talk about those experiences. If you have communication with your family members or the people you live with and they're also black, you're going to openly talk about these things. And in those shows, you didn't really see a lot of that. It was more like, we just don't talk about this and brush it under the rug. I would say if you are a black family or any kind of minority, you're probably talking about a lot of your experiences out in the world as a minority. I think that's the difference, that these shows didn't really portray that. And maybe there might have been like those select episodes targeting racism or whatever. And I'm not saying everybody's experiencing racism all day and you're like walking down the street and everybody's like calling you the N-word. Like that's not everybody's reality either. But the shows were more like, let's watch these black people on screen. But unless it was like UPN or BET, I don't even know if UPN exists anymore, but in LA it was Channel 13. They showed mostly like the Wayans brothers and like I think the show Night Court and like more like black shows. All right. So I'm taking a little stroll. Sorry guys, I need to kind of get out of the house. Nothing's wrong. I don't know. It's just easier for me to record when I'm not home. So I'm driving to another spot to go record. But I guess what I was trying to say is, we went to this camp, but the winter camp where all the kids could go and join. And we kind of interacted with other kids and stuff, but I guess along that route, like we had been interacting with a bunch of kids, with the kids who had gone to be invited to this other camp, where there were just the special ones invited. And after being jealous and upset with that, we kind of, for me, I'll talk about my experience, because I don't know, like I know a lot of people took badly to it, and were very, I don't know how to explain this. Like, it's hard because it's like I felt bad about it at first too, because I was like, man, like, the church doesn't see me as good enough, these teachers don't see me as good enough. And when you're in high school, that kind of stuff matters to you. Like, now it's kind of like I could probably brush something like that off and just be like, whatever, they don't really know me and they're gonna judge me based on whatever kind of things they want to see anyways, whether that's racial stuff or, your family's money or whatever that may look like your family's status in the church, or like, it's like a popularity contest. And I hate to say that with a church environment that did exist, but there was always this kind of popularity contest. The people who were kind of more strict than others were kind of upheld with a little more honor and, recognition. And it was purely based on what other people thought of you. It wasn't necessarily based on if you were routinely making mistakes. It was kind of more like what they saw. Like, because I guess because I socialized with so many people, I knew that almost everybody was kind of the same. Like, behind closed doors, a lot of people weren't keeping the Sabbath rules. Behind closed doors, people were eating pork and non-vegetarian stuff in general and eating meat. And then around church, everybody suddenly wants to pretend like they're vegetarian, or wants to pretend like they don't buy on the Sabbath or sell on the Sabbath or work on the Sabbath, and like all these things. And I'm like, I know this isn't true, because I would hang out with people and kind of know that, people would code switch. Like, people would totally code switch between like living a secular life and living a religious life, and people would do that. And I myself, I'm pretty sure I did that too. Everybody kind of did that. And I'm not saying people shouldn't do it or whatever. Like, it's a survival technique. Like, you learn to kind of play the game. And like, you kind of learned, okay, like, I'll get more of what I want or more of what I need if I pretend, And then sometimes I think it was like, okay, people do like some of the stuff, but there's also that struggle of like trying to adhere to all these like strict traditions where it's like nobody really can do it. And if you're living in a city like LA, I mean, people don't live here because they're trying to live like the Amish. Like, when you live in a city like LA, there's something that you like that you're holding to. It's not just the opportunity, but you like having those things, those options around you. I don't think people move to like major cities and like, I just want to stay only with my community of religious people and ignore everybody else. It's like, usually people are like, they want to be around open-minded environments. They want to be in like a city structure. Like, I feel that people want that. And so that's kind of like what they do, If they really, truly didn't want to be around any other types of people, then they wouldn't be around them. They wouldn't, be trying to like be around someone if they kind of knew that, it was something that they were, I don't know, like, people wouldn't make that choice to be around somebody if they truly didn't want to be around someone, They wouldn't really make that decision, That's my opinion. I think people wouldn't really be making those kind of opinions, but I don't know, like, I feel like, there was a, there's a difference between, people who like their traditions, want to uphold the traditions, people who kind of want to on the surface look like that, or people who maybe gravitate back towards it when they're around other people who are doing it, because they're like, I kind of do like this a little bit. I was kind of more one of those people where I was like, okay, when in Rome, I didn't really mind doing what my conservative friends were doing. I didn't really mind not eating pork or not, doing certain things when I was in other people's households. I wasn't like offended that they were living like super strict. I was like, I don't mind this on occasion. I kind of liked the disconnection from mainstream and all that. I kind of enjoyed living the separate religious lifestyle at times, but and I tried to do it on my own, and I did kind of realize, maybe this isn't really for me, but I did kind of like that deprivation, like that self deprivation. Is that what it's called? When you're kind of like being strict and depriving yourself of certain things, not like not eating, but like doing things like fasting or praying or staying off of like watching television or not watching like secular shows or not listening to secular music. I did like the process of like disconnecting from those things sometimes, kind of like how I do now, like as a project. It was like, let me see how long I can like do this. But then I also did not like that the church took this like shame approach where it was like, if you can't do it for your whole entire life, you're a screw up kind of thing. Like they didn't say that, but that was definitely the message, that like you should aspire to doing all these traditions. And if you can't, it's because like either you have these weaknesses or like you just need to be stronger or you need to rededicate yourself. So I kind of went through this period of time where I started realizing all the stuff that was hard for me to do, or that maybe I just didn't align with and didn't really, because it's like I can do any of that stuff if I want to do it. Like I can avoid caffeine if I want to avoid caffeine. I can avoid certain things if I want to avoid them. I've been able to prove to myself that I can avoid certain things that in this religion, were parts of the traditions. I can strictly keep the Sabbath according to their traditions. I can strictly keep dietary rules and stuff. I can do all that kind of stuff, but I don't want to do it, which is why I don't really push myself to do it, because I don't want to. For periods of time, I think I find it easier to ground myself when I kind of get back to some of the Adventist traditions, and I'm kind of like, okay, like let me separate myself out from this other stuff in the world and kind of like ground in something kind of like more spiritual based versus like all the random nonsense that's going on in society. Like I do find myself definitely, especially in times like this, very much connected with that kind of mindset of like, I can see clearly what's not healthy for me. Not always, but sometimes I can tell when it starts wearing on my energy, my irritability levels, my other things, my sleep, other stuff like that. When I start noticing my basic areas of my life are getting affected by something, I can definitely step back and be like, whoa, like this is something's messing with me right now, and I need to kind of figure it out before it gets worse. I'm better now at doing that than I've ever been in my life, but it's only because I have time to do it though. Like usually I'm not able to have time, but I have time. But yeah, like I guess um I'm pretty much not the only one that's like that. And then there are other people that like truly struggle and want to do all of it. And then there are other people that just want it on the surface to kind of look like that's what they do, and they want to like not be fully truthful with their own lifestyle, and they want to pretend like they want to fit in, and it's easy to like fake it, you know um I found it easy to fake it anyways, like but it's easy to fake it, but after a lot of these people, after their experience kind of rubbed off on me some, the jealousy part kind of wore away, and I was kind of like, let me actually listen, because these are my friends, and this thing doesn't seem like it's a fad. We've got a couple weeks, maybe a few months like this now, and they're still not, back to their normal ways. So I'm like, well, maybe they have found like some life hack that they've kind of unlocked. Let me kind of listen to them more. And so my friend that kind of like got rid of his Slipknot CD, I started kind of just paying more attention to him, because the other people, I didn't really trust them as much, because I was like, some of these people are another religion, some of these other people, like, kind of like, we don't even get along as it is, like, I kind of didn't trust them as much. But there was this one guy that I'm like, I still do kind of have a lot of, We have a history. We have a long history. We've known each other for like 36, 37 years. I mean, like, we've got a history together. So it's really hard for me to, like, I know this guy better than I know some of my family members on some levels, you know? It's like, we spent so much time together, you know? Like, I mean, I feel like in my life he's been a toxic force at times too, and I'm pretty sure I've been a toxic force in his life too. But we're kind of we're kind of I don't know. I've been figuring out ways to interact with him, but I don't want to get back into that conversation. But um, you know, a lot of times, a lot of people are um, you know, I kind of realized with this Bible camp, um, can I open this window? It's getting hot. One second. Yeah, I never heard people walking. Um, but I kind of realized with this Bible camp that, you know, they had experienced a life altering, they had a life altering experience. And there was a time where I was like, let me try to tune in and like listen to what some of these people are saying, because they're my actual friends. We grew up together. Now, some of them I was like, okay, they're like the pastor's kids or whatever. Like, of course they're gonna have like a different angle. But I'm like, with the other people who I was like, we kind of already got along. Like, I had a lot of respect for them, and I was like, let me actually listen to what they have to say. And I don't know, like, you know, let me actually listen to what they have to say. Let me actually, like, you know, see if you know, there's a way to kind of figure out what's up with them right now, like, because they seem different. And I kind of want to know more, because they seem happy, and it seems like it's, at least at the time, I was like, maybe this is permanent, you know, like, they're not going back to how they were before, so we're no longer going to be like running around telling dirty jokes and, you know, having the kind of fun that we used to have, you know, like, you know, they're not ultra religious and super happy with it. And so let me talk to them more about this. And, you know, they were kind of always in this like esoteric kind of realm of like talking about things. I just remember some specific experiences. There was one time in class where where I um yeah, there was this joke going around school about somebody was raped by an ape. I don't remember where that came from. There was like this guy at school. There was some trip that people had gone on that I didn't go on. Let's say they went to San Francisco or someplace where there was like a zoo or something, and there was some joke that came out of that trip where I guess some people had gotten poo thrown at them by some of the monkeys, and then there was some other joke going around because something happened with some ape and some other guy. I remember it was a guy student, and there was a joke where people were like, he got raped by an ape. But like, this obviously didn't happen because it was at a zoo, and like, people were just like outside the cages. Like, that didn't happen. But whatever had happened with him at this experience at the zoo, he kind of came up with this joke. And then I remember being in class once. We were doing some writing assignment, and I would always be just like disruptive. So like, everyone was like writing something, and it was relatively quiet, and the teacher probably had like music in the background. And I remember being like, oh, like, so and so was raped. Like, I didn't say so and so, but I was like, somebody mentioned something about like a monkey or something, because people would just like talk to the class and just like say something, but it wasn't like talking time. But like, the teacher didn't crack down if it wasn't like too loud. And so like, somebody would say something, then like a little bit later somebody else would say something. So someone had said something, And then I remember just being like, oh, they were raped by an ape, you know. And then one of my friends, the friends that was considered one of the holier students who had gone on this Bible camp trip, he was like, don't say that, like somebody in this class might have actually been raped. And I was like, oh, sorry, like I didn't really like think about that. But I was like literally telling this joke that everybody had been saying, and I was like, it was something like that that kind of hit me. I was like, okay, so the things that I say, you know, because I was in high school, maybe even junior high, I don't even remember what grade I was in, but I used to just be saying whatever came to my mind. I didn't think about who was around me or any of that. I would just like say whatever, because like I wasn't fully a class clown, but I was really like ADHD, like disruptive, like maybe ADD, not ADHD. I don't think I had the hyperactive part, but a little bit. I could see that in me. I definitely wasn't the most focused in school. It was hard for me to focus around so many people, and it, like I mentioned before, like we had classes that were like fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, like so there were, when I was trying to do the lessons in class, there was never silence. There were always people. The teacher was usually talking, you know, talking, telling the other lesson, or there'd be like short periods of 10 to 15 minutes to finish assignments where it would take me way longer than that. So I was often not finishing assignments in class. And kind of same at work. I kind of realized that it's like some stuff I work better at home by myself. And so once I realized that I wasn't going to get stuff done in class anyways, and I was just going to have to take it home anyways, I might as well just screw around in the 10-15 minutes that we have to finish the skill pack or study guides or whatever, reading like critical thinking questions and stuff. I'll just take this home and do it anyways, because in the 10 minutes I'll probably get through one question, or I can joke around with the classroom with the other kids who don't want to pay attention. I'll joke around for 10 minutes and disrupt everybody else. But I wasn't trying to like disrupt everyone. I was just trying to have fun because I was so bored. I was like, this is so boring. And like I said, I always used to socialize with like almost everybody. So it's like all these people I considered friends. I mean, I could tell I was obnoxious to some of them because when I look back, I'm like, some people would often be telling me to stop saying the things I was saying, and I would never stop. I would just keep on going and going and going. Or I would take the group of people I was talking to and be like, let's go talk over there then, like, because these people clearly don't want to hear these horny conversations or using profanity or talking about white people or whatever kind of like experiences the minorities of us, the ethnic minorities of us, were having with some of the white people. Not even necessarily at the school, but just like in our neighborhoods, because things were the segregation type. This is like the 90s. Things were different. There was kind of like more of a white people, black people. You listen to rock music or you listen to rap music. It was back then where it was like, it was very rare that you come across people that were like open minded to all types of music, or it was popular to hate country music, or like if you like classical or jazz, you were considered like really weird. Like these were different times. So I specifically remember being you know, talking to these other students, and you know, I remember that situation, the rape by an ape thing, and you know, it kind of made me think, because at first I was like, how dare they think they're holier than me, so they're gonna like put me on blast in front of the whole class. But then I like, the more I kind of thought about it, because that's usually my first response to like, you know, embarrassment or some kind of like, if somebody's like calling me out on something, usually I get mad first. I'm just like, how dare they? They don't even know. Like, they think they're better than me, or like they think they're smarter than me, or whatever. Like, I'll get like totally in my ego about it and just be like upset. But then I'll think about it enough, usually to a point where after that I'm able to see another viewpoint, and I'm like, I'm able to step outside of my own knuckleheaded self and just be like, okay, maybe that might affect people. And I've had to kind of learn that way, where I'm like, okay, like I do try to be a little more careful with that kind of stuff. That's something I definitely learned from not just that experience, but just the way I was socially back in like high school and junior high. Like, I was like, okay, like maybe I shouldn't just say every single stupid thing that comes to my mind just impulsively, and I should think about others a little more. But I also had a little, it was a bit of a wall. I kind of created this kind of like wall because of the environments where people were so like closed-minded, where people were so closed off, and judgmental. I did create for myself. I created for myself like a better, like kind of like it was kind of like a defense mechanism, like be obnoxious, make people think that, not that I'm a threat, but make people think that I could say anything at any time, so don't mess with me kind of thing. But I wouldn't say I was like bullying people. I was never like singling people out. I was just completely obnoxious. Like I kind of like was always joking around. I was always like calling people stupid or being like a little bit sarcastic with everybody just to kind of keep a wall up, because I was like, I don't want people to think or know that I'm actually really nice. I would rather just have people assume that, I could, say something and like make them feel bad or something if they kind of start messing with me. I think that's where that came from, because I noticed once I got out of an environment like that where people were a lot more mature and a lot less gossipy and a lot more like restrained with like how they interacted socially, and a lot more careful with one another and a lot more compassionate with one another. Once I started realizing that, I was like, okay, like I can be different around these people. But it was always that group of church community that I was like, I can't really um, fully be like too much of myself, because it's not like safe to be myself around these people. Um, I kind of noticed that. I kind of realized that was the reality. I'm like, I can't really be. This isn't really safe for me. Um, and so, I did kind of notice that after a certain point, and so because I kind of realized it, um, I was able to kind of change it over time. But um, mostly what helped was just being outside of that environment. When I was no longer around those types of people, I just saw somebody flip some other person off. um, what is wrong with people? He was probably tailgating him in the parking lot or something, or probably honked at him. But one guy, instead of waiting behind him in the turn lane, he went around him to go left while the other guy was going right. Instead of waiting behind the guy, waiting for him to turn right, the guy came out of the parking lot and turned left first. Like, he didn't cut him off, he just got to the left of his car and turned left instead of waiting behind. It's like one lane. You're not there. There isn't a turn lane there. And then the other guy was just like flipping him off out the window. So I don't really understand. I feel like something else must have happened before that, or people are just. I do notice on the roads people are a lot more agitated lately. I have definitely noticed that. This is 10:30. It's now 10:57 a.m. on a Thursday. But yeah, so I did definitely notice that there were more things that I was trying to work on. But I was a high schooler, so it was also like I was not a very secure person in high school. But I got by. Like I did good enough. But I definitely had, I definitely started noticing, okay, certain kids are better at certain stuff than me. Certain kids are faster, they're more skilled. I definitely started noticing that, like around like 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. And because our class sizes were so small, there was definitely a lot of pressure to be like, I gotta keep up appearances. I can't be like of 5 students, the one student that's doing so bad. And so I did kind of get a little more competitive in school, but I was trying to like learn, because I was like, clearly the stuff they're teaching me in school, they never really taught us really how to study or like what to do. So I started trying to learn just by observing other people, and this Bible camp thing was one of them. And I was kind of like, Well, I started observing, and I'm like, well, let me just model, let me just model some of these other people and do what some of these other people are doing. So the kids that I saw that weren't using profanity anymore, I was like, let me try that. And the kids that weren't really watching a lot of like, MTV and all that kind of stuff, and were watching more like TBN, or like doing more Bible studies, or doing more prayerful stuff, I was like, let me try and do some of that. Let me try some of that. And I was like, exploring with different things that I was like, well, I see other people finding benefits, so let me just try the stuff that other people are doing that seems like it's benefiting them. And I think it did get me pretty far, just like observing what worked for certain people. But it was like pull a little from here, pull a little from there. It was never like one full method or one full lifestyle where I was like, this one lifestyle with everything attached to it is totally what works for me. It was always just like little bits and pieces. I was gaining like small little life hacks here and there. But this Bible camp experience kind of stuck out to me because I was like, oh, like it doesn't matter how much you read the Bible and pray and how much you know about the Bible, how much you can talk about it. People are still going to think that you're not worthy enough to like be part of like a certain holy group of people or whatever. And however they're making that decision, because I was just thinking like some of these people who got chosen, like we smoke pot together, like what's going on here? Like we sit around and talk with profanity and listen to all the secular music and watch MTV and go to movies together, yet they got chosen and I didn't. So it was kind of like stuff like that where I was kind of like, I started noticing like there is some politics to this, like it's not, these teachers, these pastors, they don't see and know everything. The way that they make their decisions does have some judgment and some human flaw involved and some favoritism. These were things that maybe I was completely blind to before. And I started noticing that in the systems of the church. It's like, well, how come so and so gets to do congregational prayer? Or how come they let these certain people on the stage and they put these people in the bulletin, but then these other people they kind of like never even call to reach out to them, like because maybe they got pregnant before marriage, or they realize that this person now is smoking cigarettes, or they don't keep the Sabbath and so they no longer get the invite. Like, and it was subtle, but because I hung out with a lot of the different people from a lot of the different angles, I kind of knew early on that like everybody's kind of the same. There are some people that are like super devout and strict, but most people were not that way. Most people were very like just like trying not to get thrown under the bus kind of thing. Um, Most people were just kind of like live your secular life. You still have this Adventist culture kind of under your belt. You're not fully secular, but you're not fully Adventist, but you kind of play the part on both ends of the spectrum, depending what you're doing in your week. And not that people didn't care, but I definitely started noticing these different things. So basically, that's the background. So fast forward to how we would be in chapel in school. Like I remember our chapels, they were Friday mornings. We used to have to wear chapel clothes because it was like just before the Sabbath, even though it was the morning of Friday. It was the morning of Friday, but sundown was until Friday night, obviously. And then, but chapel was the closest day to Saturday, so we would do chapel on Friday mornings. Um, and we'd have our chapel clothes on all day long, and it would kind of bring you into the Sabbath. So it felt like more church. Like it felt like church was extended from like Friday mornings all the way to like Saturday nights. Um, but very immersive culture, even though everyone wasn't going home doing their own thing all the time. Like it's not your typical LA lifestyle. Let me just tell you that much. Um, and I'm happy I was raised in it, but it's been a lot of I've had to spend so many years like undoing some of that stuff. Um, but yeah, there were a lot of um there were a lot of you know um people that I didn't really um like I don't know, like in chapels, we started acting differently. We're like, okay, like if they let any of the older class people pray, it was like their prayers were a lot more like, you know, passionate, I guess I would say. Like they kind of had a lot more to say. They took it more seriously. You know, they were kind of more vulnerable with what they would say. It wasn't just like, okay, God, thank you for this day and thank you for this food, amen, kind of thing. It was like there was a lot more thought put into it, a lot more energy. I noticed the prayers getting a little bit lengthier, but not like necessarily in a pretentious way. Like we weren't taught to. I guess in the Adventist culture in general, you don't tend to have these prayers that are like the longer you pray, the holier you feel. You're kind of taught to kind of like, you know, stick to things kind of more like the Lord's Prayer or like how these other students learned the Acts Prayer, and stick to more of that kind of stuff. Um, sorry, I'm in the street racing area right now, so I'm not street racing, but people race over here all the time. But yeah, um, yeah, I definitely had that going on, and I was very um, 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 I sorry, my brain, guys. I apologize. This is how my brain gets when things are kind of not easy to talk about. My brain just kind of shuts down. That's literally what's happening. Like I don't really tend to spend a lot of time thinking about this kind of stuff. So sometimes when I do start thinking about it, I'm like, wow, this is kind of heavy. Not like negative heavy, but it's like a lot to kind of unpack. And plus, I recorded a lot of stuff about like political related things earlier, so my brain is already kind of wiped from that. But um, and it's kind of noisy over here. But I do want to talk. I do want to talk about this stuff. So basically, yeah, in our chapels, our weekly chapels that were just Friday chapels as part of school, everybody went. They did it once a week. All the teachers, all the staff pretty much went, except for maybe if they were cooking lunch or some like janitorial staff or whatever. Like there were people who weren't obligated to go, but everybody went. It was almost like church. So even if you didn't go to church, you would have church at school on Fridays. Basically, it was church. It was like the same structure as church, minus the offerings, minus some of the other types of stuff. But it was very churchy. I mean, it was a religious school, so we did as much church stuff. We did a lot of praying and things that wasn't out of the norm. But I remember we were in chapels. Our chapels changed because as older kids now, like when we were in chapels, we would like sing louder, and like sometimes people would start standing up and like clapping along with the music. Not really like dancing, fully dancing, but a little bit of like a little bit more movement, maybe like bobbing their heads or tapping a foot or something. Like you could tell they were like more into the music, and there was kind of more of a spirit about the place, like kind of like an energy. It's kind of like the difference between if you go to a concert and everybody's just like sitting down in their chairs, nobody really cares, everybody's just talking to each other and just like not even paying attention, versus if you're at a concert where everybody, even if there are chairs, everybody's like standing up and like jumping around and like, you know, singing along and like screaming the lyrics to the songs. Like, I mean, it wasn't that extreme. It wasn't like at a concert, but it was way more like that than what it had been. Because before it was like we're singing these stale songs, we always sing the same songs, and like they started taking on more of the roles in chapel. Like they would lead more of like prayers, and they would like allow them to get the mic more. Because usually up until that point, I remember it was just teachers or the principal who were in charge, and they would kind of give us updates about the newsletters, and I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It was basically like having church at school once a week. Um, so there was still like the song service, the prayers, the sermon or lesson or the special speaker or whatever. But it was a little less formal, but we were still wearing our chapel clothes. We had like special clothes that we had to wear for chapel. It wasn't weird. It was like we had uniforms. We had to wear certain uniforms. Like once the uniforms started being implemented, I think when I was in like fourth or fifth grade or so, that's when we started having to wear wear chapel dress. And so yeah, the guys would have to wear a white shirt with slacks, long slacks, and a tie that was the school tie. The girls had to wear this like plaid either jumper with a white shirt under or a plaid skirt with a white shirt. I don't think we were able to wear different color shirts to my memory. I think the shirts always had to be white on chapel day. I can't remember. But um, yeah, we had a uniform dress code and everything. If you're in the older grades, you had to wear a certain dress code, but you didn't really wear the uniforms anymore. So like our dress code 9 and 10 was no longer wearing the uniform, but we always had to wear like back then cargo pants, khakis. Gap had their like khakis and stuff. So that kind of style was more popular, or like the cargo pants that were kind of not really jeans. So we were allowed to wear non-jean pants, no shorts. We were allowed to wear button-up shirts. Like either our shirts usually had to have a collar, or if they didn't, they couldn't be a t-shirt. Like it couldn't be just like a plain t-shirt. It had to be. I think our shirts had to have a collar actually. Sweaters didn't have to have a collar, but your shirts had to have a collar and no logos or anything, unless it was like Nike or Champion. If it was just like only like the sports logo, I think you could wear like sweaters and things that just had the logo. But like for like a sweatshirt or hoodie or something like that. But and then for PE, I think we all had our PE uniforms, blue shorts and a white shirt, and our white shirts had the SBJA logo on them. I think when you were 9 and 10, I think you still had the same dress code. I don't really remember, but I think that's how it went. But yeah. Um, but yeah, we in chapel, we kind of got more practice of like trying to like be a little more like enthusiastic about our worship services, and it kind of spread a little bit. So like when people would start standing up, and like clapping, after like a few weeks of doing that, like everybody, like the whole chapel started standing up, and like everybody would be clapping and singing louder and like a little more like enthusiastic. It kind of spread to the whole school, even the little kids. So they liked the results of this. Obviously, they liked the results. Um, and so, jeez, sorry, this amount of noise is like, um, so we basically went, um, to this Bible camp where it was the other schools. Like other schools went, I want to call it like 7 through 12, grade 7 through 12, I want to say. I could be wrong, but I think it was grade 7 through 12 because we almost always did 7, 8, 9, 10 for the junior academies, but then the schools that went fully through high school were allowed to like bring their full high school years. But again, all these schools didn't have like so many kids, so like there were really 15 to 20 kids per group coming through. And we had already been at our own schools experiencing this on fire for Jesus kind of thing for like a long time by this point. So for us, it became like a norm. It was like, okay, when the music starts, we get pumped up and we start singing loud, even if it's like boring hymns or whatever. Like we kind of put more effort into it. If you're the one playing the music, you're putting more effort into it now than what we used to do. Like we actually really start, and the teachers weren't making us do this. This wasn't teacher influence. This was children influencing other children. I mean, of course, the adults were the ones that influenced those kids. And when they went to that initial Bible camp, the special one that had just a few people who went, when they had gone to that special Bible camp and come back, it was clearly, it wasn't just all students that were like impacting each other. Like there were adults that were speaking. I don't know what happened because I wasn't there. I don't know all the details. I tried to ask more questions because I was super curious. I was like, what happened to you guys at that camp? Like, what was going on? Like, what did you guys do? And all they really said is like they prayed a lot more and they kind of sang a lot more and did a lot more worshiping. And I was just like, how is that what got you doing all this and seeming happier and stuff? And so I kind of realized, I was like, okay, they're really like pumped up and they're really enjoying life and they're really, you know, showing a side of life that seemed a lot more appealing to what I was experiencing. I was like, my life is boring compared to this, and I was like, it would be within, you know, I would be favored maybe by the church or by God or by other people in the society I was in. They would probably look more highly on me if I was like doing these things. So there was a social incentive. You know, I wouldn't have that incentive today, you know, but back then I was like, oh, like, I want to be one of the cool people, you know, so I want to be like ultra religious like this. And I wouldn't say I was ultra religious, but I kind of gravitated more towards the, you know, trying to be positive about things, trying to be, it was a toxic positivity, but you know, versus the toxic negativity that we had been experiencing, it was like full swing to the other end of the spectrum. So that was interesting to see happen, and I think I enjoyed it. It was a lot more enjoyable. Um, but there was this aspect where I felt like some of the kids that went felt like they kind of had a superiority to be able to kind of call people out on stuff, or to be able to kind of like, you know, reprimand people, and like, you know, just because like they were living this kind of like way, and like nobody really said that. I don't know, it kind of, there were aspects of it that weren't perfect. I'm not saying it was perfect, but I also don't remember all of those details. I just remember that one, the rape by an ape thing, that I felt kind of some kind of way about it, because I was like, okay, if you're gonna like, you know, you could have just pulled me aside and said that. You don't have to say it like in front of the whole class kind of thing. But I mean, they were right, but at the same time, it was kind of like just the way that it was delivered. I was kind of like, that wasn't okay, you know, and different kind of stuff like that. And I'm not saying what I was saying was okay, but like I was always saying stuff like that. I wasn't like challenging myself on it. I was just like, this is more fun for me. It felt safer for me. It probably was. Like, nobody messed with me. Like, it was, like, as far as I knew, I didn't think, there were probably rumors about me, but I didn't know of any. And, you know, like, I didn't really hear people talking crap about me. I kind of had a decent reputation enough because I was kind of friendly with everybody, even though I was really obnoxious to some people at some times, you know. I still wasn't, like, not friendly to people. I still liked enough people, you know, and I'd speak up for my friends. I remember calling out some of these like gossipy girls and being like, why are you guys even like gossiping? Isn't she your friend? And like the other guy that she was dating was my friend, and I'm like, you guys are just trying to break them up, and like, why are you gossiping about them and like talking about them behind their backs, and that's not right. And I remember the pastor's daughter kind of like overhearing that conversation. And I was just like, yeah, you better listen. Because she was the one that was always telling me not to, like, cuss and, like, not to talk about racial things. So I was like, I kind of wanted her to overhear that. Because I'm like, I'm trying to stick up for people here. I'm not really just, like, trying to get under everybody's skin. It's like, I'm actually smart and I have things to say, you know, that I think are worthy of you know, of saying, you know, and that would help this community and culture, you know. I'm not just trying to be, like, you know, disruptive, you know. So yeah, I was kind of trying to be more um I don't know, like I was trying to understand things more. Um so fast forward, you know, we're at this, I'm gonna be telling the story for like 2.5 hours. Um, we're at this camp. We're at this camp with the other students now, and it's winter, and it's just a typical winter Bible camp of some kind where we're there for multiple days on end, more than just like 2 days, but it was probably 4 to 7 days or so, 6 days maybe. We were there for like half a week to a week or so. And then, I remember being like, I remember feeling the energy. That's one of the first things I remember. Because it's like, think about it, a bunch of high school students, a lot of like rebellion, a lot of just like people like mocking the church and not really wanting to think that it's like cool. Like when you're a teenager and you're raised in like ultra religion, you kind of, gravitate towards either like the good kids. There's kind of usually the good kids, the really goody kids, or the ones who are kind of in the middle, or the ones who are kind of rebellious. But I kind of hung out with all of the groups. And so it was like, I could talk the religion. I could be kind of like on the fence and just understand the perspectives of the people that kind of practice, kind of don't. And I could do the total let's go smoke pot behind the rock church. Let's go smoke pot, out in the backfield, while the rock music, like while the preaching comes on, let's go smoke some weed. Like I was on I was all of the above. Like I did all of it. Like I don't really care. Like I did all of it. I dabbled in a little bit of all of the culture. And so I was able to see it from so many angles. And yeah, it was really interesting to kind of be a part of it like that. But we go to this camp, I feel the energy. I feel the rebellious energy, the kind of like energy, the energy that you feel when there's a bunch of teens that come and sit down in a room and it's like, I got my shields way up. They're on like, my shields are like up. I've got a shield over my shield, it's like, I'm not even, everybody wants to be like the cool kid, doesn't want to stand out as like some religious geek kind of person, doesn't want to be considered like nerdy. But I kind of realized the tone at our school had changed to where if you weren't like being like passionate about your faith, you weren't a cool kid anymore. It wasn't cool to be rebellious anymore. And I kind of fell into that, and I was like, oh, like not like follow the rules, don't question the church, because we were definitely questioning the church, because we were like, well, the church is wrong too, because these adults are rebellious and they don't have passion for God and all. We were really kind of like, we don't care if you're a kid or an adult, we think you're all wrong. Like it was like, it kind of got to that point to where like the kids were like calling out their parents and like, oh, like it got out of hand, but it was cool because it was like, we thought we were like a movement, and it became fun in a way, because I like, once I became like a part of it, I was like, oh, this is cool, like I like this. But I definitely struggled with it because I was definitely outspoken, and I was definitely still disruptive in class, and I like to just kind of say whatever I wanted to say. But I was kind of just like, that thing that I said in school too, where they said raped like an ape, and then I said the raped like an ape comment, and then because everyone else had been saying it in some lower grade, people were talking about some trip. And so I was hanging out with some of those kids too, and then like there was this rape by an ape joke, and I remember I started saying that joke, and then when that one guy called me out and was like, somebody might have been raped and you shouldn't say that, and I was like, oh shoot, he's probably right, and I'm like, oh sorry, and I was like, I remember saying to him, I don't know if it was at this time or another time, but it was in, like, everyone's in class trying to like quietly do their work. There might have been some soft music in the background. The teacher wasn't like speaking up in front. Like we were all at our desk, but just kind of like a little banter across the room here and there every so often. And I remember being like, I want to be like you. I want to be happy like you. And I think it was that time when I said that. I think it was attached to that same conversation, or another day when I was just popping off in class and I brought that up, and I was like, I want to be happy like you, and he was like, no, you don't want to be like me, you want to be like God. And I was just like, oh, like, it was like, we'd be having moments like that, where it's like, I'm pretty sure the teachers were like, what is going on with these students? But we were like, I remember that now, I totally have forgotten that, but yeah, he was like, you want to be like God, and I was just like, oh, like, yeah, like, I was like so like into it. But like I guess that's how we resolved that. I think that's how we resolved that whole conversation across the room. But then I kind of like, when I kind of think about it, I'm like, I don't know, all these people thinking I'm being like God. That's kind of like what they were trying to do. That was the goal, was be like God. That was our goal. That was kind of our mindset. We want to be like God. We want to be like Jesus. And so we thought that's what we needed to do, was be like hardcore, like extra, ultra religious. But it wasn't the religious we were taught. This is so like there became like this disconnect between the religion we were taught to be, and then like, so this little movement that we had with our like junior high and high school students in this school that started spreading and spreading throughout households and stuff became a problem, because now you have all these passionate teenagers, rebellious teenagers, that are now rebelling against the religion to do this other thing that we thought was like right, because we were calling out the inconsistencies that we saw, and we're like, well, these people aren't teaching it right, and they're preaching hate, and these people aren't showing love, and they're not praying with passion, and these people aren't like, they don't seem really in the spirit when they're singing these songs. And we would be just kind of like dissecting everything and just being like, this is wrong about the church and that's wrong. And it's like we were kind of seeing like these adults in our lives, kind of came down to that. We're like, these adults don't know what they're doing, and we're smarter because we have the passion and the time and the energy, and we're better than they are, like, because God gave us this like revelation of some kind or whatever. I don't know what we thought, but it got to a level that was like, now we're upsetting our parents and the teachers, and like everybody's kind of getting a little bit like, this like religious thing started like taking over, to where like it was like getting out of hand. So it was like, okay, now they're being rebellious teenagers again, even though they're being religious, they're not being the type of religious that the church wants them to be, and just standing in line and following, the status quo. They're challenging the status quo. They're challenging church traditions. They're challenging hierarchies. They're challenging equality. We started just like speaking up about a bunch of stuff, and they didn't like that. They were like, well, this isn't what we wanted. We didn't want you guys, trying to, we didn't want you guys doing this. We wanted you to follow in line with what we said. We didn't want you to do this and start rebelling. We weren't trying to like opt into that, So we get to this Bible camp. We'd already had this stuff going on, so we get into this room full of just like maybe almost 100 or so teenagers, where everybody's trying to be the cool kid, you dress to impress. So we kind of had our little styles. I don't remember if we had uniforms. I think we did. I don't know if we had to wear uniforms at the camp. That sounds like we wouldn't have had to do that. But I remember we were being like super polite, please and thank you to everybody, and like happy with everybody and smiling. And like we try to interact with the other students, but we wouldn't like give in to their like, their gossipy conversations, or like if they were talking with profanity or whatever, we kind of shifted the way we were talking and stuff, and like toned it down a lot and tried to be a little more conscious about certain things. And I remember when the music started, I remember we were like, we because this was normal to us now. The music starts, whoever's singing like some boring song, all they had in that room was like a piano, like a grand piano. I don't think any of the schools brought like their band, their like praise band and worship team type of, instruments. I don't remember there being drums. I don't remember there really being anything but like maybe an acoustic guitar, not even mic'd or amped, and a piano, maybe. Or maybe we sang to like song tracks, but I think there was like a piano. I think somebody would play piano. I don't remember. Or maybe this other school, I think, because there was a school, Saja, that was really good at their San Antonio Junior Academy. They were really good. And there was Antelope Valley. I think there was San Antonio and Antelope Valley, South Bay Junior Academy. I can't remember if Glendale went. but there were like 3, 4, or 5 schools. I don't know. And then I remember, I think maybe they were leading the worship because they were really like musically skilled. Like they were like really good musically. Like all of us were decent musically because I don't know if you know Adventists, it's like two things, like sports and music. It's like that's the only thing you're allowed to do, really. So like people do a lot of that because it's like you're raised around all these people who aren't allowed to like do anything, and it's like you can make music and play sports and not really have to like buy movie tickets or go to the mall or like watch music videos at each other's houses. Like there's stuff like those were activities that were like open for all. So we tended to do a lot of sports and music. So we were doing a lot of sports and music. They were really musically talented. These Saja kids were, and we really liked their style of music. So I think they were leading the worship, but we were like in the seats, like pumped up and like super pumped. We were like pumped for Jesus, like to like 110%. Like we were like really having a time of it during that school year, at least. Like it was a whole different lifestyle that we were living all of a sudden. And I remember they start the music. We stand up because we're just like, this is music time. We're ready to party. Like we were like so into praise music. It was like ridiculous. Like because it was like, okay, a lot of us stopped listening to like Metallica and stopped listening to like the secular music, and we love music. A lot of us love, like if you grew up in the 90s, it was like all you had was like MTV, and VH1 and BET and all that. Like it wasn't like today where like this was like even like I think maybe even pre-Napster. So and like before LimeWire even got like super popular. Like this was like before you could easily just make your own like mixed albums, mixed CDs and stuff. You're still recording stuff off the radio. So music was hard to come by unless you had money to like buy CDs and stuff. And most of my allowance went to CDs. Like I was really into CDs and like music magazines and stuff. And I had been playing guitar for like God only knows by this point, like since like 8th grade. And I was like obsessed with playing guitar. Like, cause like I said, like I was allowed to play music with friends. It didn't matter if it was secular music. We were allowed to play music. We were allowed to play sports and watch sports and stuff like that. Those were like the two types of activities that like usually the adults in our lives weren't gonna super complain if I'm like playing like a Metallica ballad. They just think it sounds good. Like as long as you're not singing the lyrics, they don't really care what it is. They're like, oh, you're practicing and learning, and then we'd start volunteering to play for the church and stuff. And so they liked that. They weren't really like so against, oh, you're learning Metallica or whatever. I don't think they really cared. But a lot of us had stopped listening to secular music because we got really influenced by one another. And so when it came to music, we were like deprived of music. So we basically were like only like super into like church music. And we were like super hardcore about church music. And we loved it. Or I mean, I don't know. I mean, I always thought it was a little watered down, at least on the musical end, because they focus more on the singing and the lyrics and like trying to like make a song that everybody wants to sing in church, and that kind of like that Hillsong vibe. There's kind of like a vibe to things, but I liked that it was. I liked that experience, it was fun, but I remember, music was starting and we're ready, like the intro, the song, we're not even into the lyrics yet, and we're like, oh, we know this first song, and we start standing up, and we're like clapping to the music and like ready to sing, and we start singing, we're just like loud. I'm like, we were so loud, there were probably like 15 of us, and we were so loud, not even everybody singing or standing, we were so loud that I couldn't even hear any of the other students singing, like, at all. Like, so think there's like 60 other students in this room that we could only hear ourselves because we're singing so loud. We're like over singing the piano. We're singing like just as loud as humanly possible. And some of this, by the end of this week, kind of rubbed off on some of the other groups because you could kind of feel them kind of being like, they got a little pressure from us, but we even overheard some of the teachers and faculty, like some of the staff coming to our staff and being like, how'd you get your kids to be like this? And they're like, we didn't do it. They just did it all on their own. Like we sent them to this Bible camp, and they, on their own, just got passionate and started like rocking out to Jesus all the time. Like they did this by themselves. Like this was something that they did like by themselves. This wasn't, what's going on? There's like this tricycle. I just saw this lady on an electric 3-wheeled. It's like a tricycle. It's a bike. It has 2 wheels in the back, but it's like an adult tricycle. There's a lady rolling around town on it. It's an electric bike. That's really cool. She just did like a U-turn in the street coming out of this parking lot. I love people watching over here, as you can tell. And here comes the bass line from somebody's loud subwoofer. Is that the tow truck? Is that the tow truck rocking out? No, I think... Oh. Where's that bass coming from? I don't know where the bass is coming from. But anyways... yeah, we start like rocking out to this music, and it's not just one song, it's like every song. And then like every song for every service, and every time they give any of us the mic to try to talk, we are just like, because I don't think I started out like that, actually. I think during this week of prayer I was maybe a little hesitant, and I remember sitting next to one of my basketball buddies. He was like, there were tiers of us in basketball. Like, almost, a lot of us played sports and played basketball, but this guy was, like, way more skilled and way more into it, and he grew to be, like, super, super tall. And so, okay, there's the bass. That's where the bass is coming from. This lowered SUV with the blacked out windows and the rims. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. He's got this big, like, decal on the back window. I wonder what that song was, though. I couldn't even hear it. The bass was way too loud. But yeah, I remember being there and, you know, feeling a little more influenced. I was like, okay, I'm comfortable with this now. And then I'll be like standing up and like singing with the rest of the people too. And then I remember, you know, we kind of sat next to the same people a lot, and I remember like looking at my friend that was next to me, and I was like, hey, stand up, you know, like get into the music, you know. And he was kind of like, what do you think, you're like holy now, or like whatever. Like I remember him saying that to me. I was like, oh shoot. And I was like, I just kind of shrugged it off. I was kind of like, whatever, like I'm so into this music. Like I was just like, I just want to like get my praise on and like dance around. Well, we weren't really allowed to dance, but like, you know, just do what we were doing with our clapping and stuff and like singing really loud. I was super into it, and I really like loud music and like choir music and stuff like that, so I was into like all the loud singing. Like I don't think I was good at it, but like it was fun to like get like super like rock out mode in church. And like we got exposed to so much live music on such a regular basis. We were often, you know, around live music, live musicians, playing live music. You know, there was a lot of that, and it wasn't quite performing arts, but it almost felt, it almost is the vibe. Like, if you know people who went to like performing arts schools, it's almost like that. Like church schools give you that type of environment where you have like a different focus. You're not like, I mean, you are focused on career and stuff, but it's not like some schools where it's like you're super into like the sports teams. Like our sports team sucked. Like we played each other. Like we had basketball leagues where we had our own internal basketball teams that played against each other because the schools were so far apart, and we only really played Adventist schools, and there weren't that many. And not everybody can make the team. And then when we did have games, it was like the teams wouldn't be that good. We never really played public schools. I think there were some Jewish schools. There was like some Jewish schools that I think Glendale played, because at least they didn't interfere like with the Sabbath. They kind of had like a similar Sabbath, so that they could play on like either Saturday nights or like Sundays. So they were able to incorporate some Jewish schools into their rotations of like competition and stuff. And I remember the Jewish I think they were Orthodox. I don't think they were ultra Orthodox. They were like, I think they were Orthodox. They didn't really, I think maybe they clapped, but I don't think they booed at all. I remember that specifically because that stood out to me. I was like, whoa, they don't like boo us or anything. And I started feeling bad because I was like in a group of people that were like booing them. And I felt bad about it because I was like, plus they're like Jewish and like it just didn't feel right. I was like, this feels almost like, because you're in a sports environment, people get a little, I didn't want it to become like racial or like prejudice. I didn't get that vibe, but like, it's sports. You're for your team. You're not for the other team. Like that's normal. But I felt a little uneasy about it because I was kind of like, it's like a different culture of people. And like, if we're booing them, this might come across as like it might be a little bit of a sensitive thing. So I remember I started like cheering for them. Like when I saw them do like cool stuff. And this wasn't even my school. I didn't go to Glendale Academy. I just had friends from there. I think it was Glendale Adventist Academy. I don't know what it's even called, but yeah. But I remember, we had sports leagues and stuff that weren't the Sunday sports league. They were like the internal school leagues, and they were good enough. Like people practiced and had skills, but it wasn't like the public schools. Like the focus of these schools almost sounds to me like when you had like performing arts schools and everybody's like singing and dancing around. Like we had a lot of people with a lot of energy on different levels that we were able to practice certain things, and music was one of those things that a lot of us were allowed to practice. So a lot of us, even people like me who didn't really have a lot of natural skill for it, we had plenty of spaces. You could play every Friday at chapel. You could play if your class was doing stuff. If you had like a school play going up, you could audition to play in that. You could play at your church multiple times a week. Because a lot of these churches were connected. You could connect with other churches. There was a lot of space to play music, and people were always wanting music, and like as long as you were reliable, you could just ask like, hey, I want to like, and you'd get invites from people from different praise teams and stuff, and you'd kind of just come and play music and interact with other people. I really just missed that, just being part of like music teams and just like popping into different music groups and just being like, I don't really play gospel. I don't understand these jazz chords, but I'm gonna play, And I would be so bad. I remember turning my guitar. I used to bring my electric so I could turn my guitar like all the way down and just be like playing, because I was like, whenever they do like a key change, they'd be like, oh, the singers can't sing it in G. Let's change the key. And I was like, shoot, I don't know how to change the key. And if I forgot my capo, I was like, dang it. I didn't really know the Cage model, and then these chords were all these like weird chords that I didn't even know, and I was just like trying to hang on. But I would go and perform with these people. I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. But yeah, I do remember that kind of pressure at this Bible camp. I remember kind of like the period of time where I went from like jealous and kind of like a little bit like kind of sensitive to a lot of what these people would say as far as their attitudes toward, I kind of felt like they were like, oh, you're not holy enough kind of thing. I started getting that vibe from a lot of angles, and then I was like, well, I do want to do better on certain stuff, but yeah, I started realizing that. So yeah, I just remember like overhearing that. I remember overhearing other teachers from other schools just being like, tell us how to get our kids on that level. Like, tell us what you did. Like, tell us, because it's like, these are Bible schools. They're Christian religious schools. They're not just like, I mean, these are schools where they want their kids to be like ultra religious. They want them to be like super hopped up on Jesus. They want that. And so when we kind of found the cheat code to kind of like do it, or some of us found it and spread it to the others, I wasn't one of the ones that was picked for that first Bible camp. But I guess later on, like, I got a different reputation. They kind of started noticing that I was changing a little bit. But I remember, like, nobody really said it to my face. I remember, I'm just looking back at this now. I'm looking back at it, and nobody really said a lot of the stuff to my face about maybe how they were noticing that I changed with certain stuff. Nobody was like praising anyone about it to their face. These were conversations happening in gossip corners, like behind closed doors or outside of my social circles. So I remember towards the end of probably the same school year, I got in a little bit of trouble because I was writing a lot of profanity in people's yearbooks. I was basically cussing people out, but it was like, okay, like I mentioned before, here comes Mr. Bass. But like I'd mentioned before, it's a Chevy Tahoe. It's a lowered Chevy Tahoe. Okay, it's got blacked out lights and everything. But yeah, I noticed, you know, they started treating some of us differently. And I guess I got on someone's radar as like changing in a positive way. Like they liked the way I had changed. But I didn't know that I was on any teacher's radars or anything. And I remember writing profanity in people's yearbooks and being like, oh, F you, you son of a B. Like, you know, I thought it was funny. It was me being how I was. Like, I always have a silly part of my personality. But at that time, it didn't align with the religion. Of course, you can't be cussing. And to do it in someone's yearbook. So there was one of those gossipy girls at lunch where she, you know, everyone's signing everybody's yearbook. And she starts, every yearbook that she gets to sign, she's like reading everything that I wrote in all the other yearbooks. And she's just like, you wrote this and that person, you wrote that and this person's. And I'm like, I wasn't seriously, like, everybody knew I was joking. I mean, it was completely off color and like, I mean, I see how from the outside, but it's like, if these teachers weren't around during lunch times when I was just cussing up a storm all the time. So it wasn't like, I don't think anyone was offended by it. But there was this one, I've talked about this, there was this one specific girl that at that time I think was dating one of my besties. She was cool. I actually wish that I still kept in touch with her. She was fun. She was nice. I actually got to know her more when she was hanging out with him, and I was like, she's actually really cool. I really liked her. Like, she was really cool for him. I was like, I kind of don't know why they didn't stay together. I never got to ask, but I was like, she's really nice. Like, she's nice to him. I don't know what they had in common, but like, they seemed good together, and I liked her and him together, and I liked getting to know her. I was surprised because I thought she'd be different, and when I got to know her better, I was like, wow, she's actually really nice. But I remember I cussed in her yearbook, and I guess her yearbook was the one that the teacher, that this gossipy loudmouth classmate had kind of been like, oh, like, you wrote that. And like, there was this lunch supervisor lady that was probably like in her 20s. She was a younger kind of, we considered her kind of younger and cool. And so we would kind of talk to her more about stuff that we wouldn't really talk to other staff about. And so this student, the loudmouth one, is like, look what she wrote in this yearbook, you know, like, read this. Because I was trying to get like a shock factor, so I got what I wanted. I was like, okay, people got shocked by what I wrote, but I don't think anyone took it seriously. I don't think I was hurting feelings, and I didn't do it to everybody. I only did it to people who I kind of talked to. And so, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't think I had animosity towards people. I don't remember feeling like jealous towards those specific people. It was just my friends. But yeah, I can understand. You know, she saw it and she didn't think it was funny. And she was like, oh, do you dislike her? Like, why'd you write that? And I was kind of like, oh, I wrote it in like everybody's yearbook. Like, I wasn't like singling her out. And I apologized to her. I was like, I'm sorry that I wrote that. And then a couple yearbooks, I remember going back and scratching it out and like changing all the words to like some other thing. Like, and it's like, you stupid, instead of like B word, it would be Barbie or something, like, you know, it would be just like, I'd have to change the words to something else. I mean, I felt bad about it because the lady was like, oh, you know, this stuff is like written in, you know, people go back and these are their memories. And like, so she took it to one of these like stricter teachers, and he kind of calls me into his classroom and he's just like, we thought that you had changed. Like, was all of that fake? All of the praying and things that you've been doing, like is that fake, kind of thing. And that was kind of where I was like, ooh, like,
what's up, buddy? Like, you're kind of taking it too far. Like, that was kind of too far. I'm like, it's one thing to tell somebody, okay, like, I don't, like, what you did wasn't right or whatever. But for a teacher to be, like, questioning some kind of spirituality aspect of, like, a high school student, it's like, to me, I'm like, that's wrong. And I even knew that it was wrong. I was like, you are doing this because you have power over me, and it's kind of like a control kind of tactic. And to, like, throw that out there, I'm like, you have no place to really, like, challenge somebody's, like, level of spirituality or, like, religious beliefs based on what you think, is going on, and, like, I didn't really say that. I stayed pretty quiet. And then they're kind of like, oh, is there trouble at home? Because they started bringing up some dynamics that they noticed between, like, my parents. And they're like, oh, because we know that, like, your dad's out of town a lot. And, like, all. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on with this guy? Like, because it was like, I was like, he wasn't trying to, how do you say this? This wasn't a normal, like, discipline the student, like, make them write lines or make them write, like, essays, or you have to write and memorize all these things, or, like, memorize, like, these 4 pages of Bible or whatever. It wasn't the normal punishments, like, you did something wrong. Do you know what you did? Yes, no. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, what's the punishment? It wasn't that. He was literally trying to make me feel bad. And I was like, this guy's a dick. And then it didn't end there, because we had another trip that we had gone on. I think we went either snowboarding, probably like a week or 2 after this. Like, mind you, I used to hang out with a lot of religious adults as a teen, as a kid. Like, I was involved in a lot of stuff. And I'm grateful that my parents let me go on a lot of the trips and stuff. And, like I said, I had a lot of, like, youth pastors and teachers who were very athletic and involved in a lot of stuff. They didn't just stay home weekends and watch TV. They were out doing geocaching and hiking and, like, bonfires and, going up ski patrol in the mountains. They'd take us snowboarding and skiing if we paid each, like, $20-$25 or something for, like, gas or whatever. And the church would cover a lot of it for, like, rentals or whatever. Like, the church would come out of pocket for a lot of these, like, youth type of activities. We would pay too, but it's like they would come out of pocket for some of the expenses, because we rarely paid more than, like, $20-$25 for anything, unless it was, like, a major trip. But I do remember him kind of calling me out like that. Like, it wasn't in front of, like, everybody, but I remember that. And then I remember there was another trip that we went on, like, a couple weeks later, where my youth pastor wasn't even involved in this. This was my high school, pretty much math, science, and religion teacher. He basically was the one kind of calling me out on what I wrote in the yearbooks. And then I remember him mention, like, I remember we were riding in this Suburban, or, like, one of those rented kind of larger vans. And I was, like, behind the driver's seat, which was my youth pastor who was driving. This teacher was in the passenger front seat. And I would always chime in on adult conversations, because I didn't really care. I was like, I like talking. I like talking to adults too, so I would talk to them too. But I kind of liked seeing a lot of these adults outside of, like, the church or school environment. So anytime I got a chance to kind of just, like, talk to them on, like, a casual level, I really enjoyed it. When we were taking these trips and stuff, I tried to talk to them more. And so I remember talking to them, and I remember kind of being involved in some kind of conversation. And, that teacher kind of brings up to this youth pastor, like, oh, like, something I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was kind of like, remember what we were talking about the other day, kind of thing, like, because that youth pastor had nothing to do with this conversation. He wasn't my teacher, so I'm like, I mean, I'm pretty sure he knew what I did, because that's the way that these churches and things work, is like, you do one bad thing and everybody learns about it. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't just, like, one person who knew. I'm pretty sure a lot of the people at school knew that I kind of got in trouble. Nothing really happened other than them telling my mom, and then my mom told my dad. My dad's like, I don't really care. Like, my dad was just like, yeah, we probably shouldn't let them buy all those albums that have all the profanity because we're not really screening that they're buying parental advisory albums, and that's probably where they're learning all this language is from their music, which is probably true. I didn't, because my parents never really cussed, really. Like, I've heard them cuss maybe, probably not even 5 times in my whole life between the two of them. And so anytime I have heard them say something, it's been like a shock because I'm like, whoa, they said something with profanity in it. Like, even today, I'm like, whoa, they said something that had like any profanity in it. Like, it's still shocking to me. And so yeah, I wasn't um I wasn't too pleased with the way this teacher handled having some kind of information on me and how they kind of like threw things in my face like that. I'm like, that wasn't right. And I'm not saying like I should have. I'm not saying what I did was right, like writing profanity in people's yearbooks and like cussing them out. To me, it was funny. It I could see how I do understand. Okay, these go down. People, even when you're my age now in your 40s, you might be looking back at your yearbook. Nobody wants somebody like, oh, this one random girl in my class like cussed me out. Even though we were friends. Like, of course, even if it's sarcastic, that wasn't necessarily right. I would never cuss somebody out like that in real life who's my friend or even who's not my friend. I don't see myself going that far to say something along those lines, but it was really, I don't know, that was a very toxic interaction. And just the fact that that teacher kind of knew some things about me and he kind of was aware of some of the things about me, and he was like, he knew things about me, he was aware of some things about me, and then he also was like, not like threatening that he was gonna like tell other people, but he was kind of like bringing it up in like a public space where I was just like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, why are you like bringing it up in other environments? Like, that's the kind of stuff where I was like, these people are not okay in the head, It's like, you don't do that kind of stuff. And to kids, like, I was a kid, like, and you have these, like, adults that are, like, holding things over your head. It's like, yeah, I fucked up, I made a mistake, I wrote some dumb shit in a bunch of people's yearbooks, and I probably shouldn't have said all that, and I went back and erased the ones that I could. It was in pen, but I did go back and do what I could to kind of try to change it, and, trying to, like, make me feel bad about it because of some religious thing, was not cool. That was not okay. But it's stuff like that that kind of really made me lose a lot of respect for some of these people. It's like, you have these environments where it's like, you should be celebrating that there's all these people kind of like challenging things, that there's youth challenging things, and trying to figure out things. It's like, dude, I was doing that stuff for ages, and nobody said anything. When I was cussing up a storm at lunchtime, nobody said anything. Except for that one girl, the pastor's daughter. She was always just like, hey, you guys stop talking like that, or you shouldn't say that kind of thing. She was the only one who kind of said anything. And then we just kind of took our conversations elsewhere, away from her ears, but she was the only one who really said anything. Everyone else heard us. Nobody else seemed offended. I knew it was wrong, but I just thought I was being rebellious. I didn't think I was doing the wrong thing. I just thought, I watch a bunch of shows on TV where there's all these adults using this language, and I was kind of challenging the church on stuff. I was like, I don't really think this is wrong or bad. I didn't really see anything wrong with it. I mean, in that context, specifically in the yearbooks, I can maybe see that, like, it wasn't the environment to be doing that. Like, especially as part of, like, a religious school to be, like, writing profanity in other people's yearbooks. And it was specifically, like, profanity against them. It wasn't profanity that was just, like, like, in passing. Like, I was literally cussing people out, but I don't think that's really how I felt. I really don't remember feeling like, I don't remember feeling all that much back then. Like, my brain wasn't fully there, yet, and I didn't fully have a lot of compassion for people back then, or even if I did, I just like stuffed it down and didn't really care like too much. Like I wasn't like too concerned with like what I said to people or whatever. Like not too much. But yeah, I do remember being a little more um like um trying to kind of understand what was really happening there, cuz I was definitely like that was like it went from like spiritual high experience, fun experience, kind of testing out those waters, to like, oh, this all leads back to like these people being judgmental. Like there was no way to really escape that. And once I realized, I was like, oh, it actually backfires if you try to be good, or you try to like outwardly like express your like spiritual concerns and like your spiritual path that you're trying to like be on or whatever. Like the more you kind of like make people aware of that, the more they can use it against you. That's kind of more what I learned. Is like, as a kid having like adults like that. But this teacher was already problematic in so many different ways. We would call him the troll. Basically, has because he had an anger issue, but we would call him the troll because he'd get all like out of sorts every now and then, and like start, like he would punish us in PE. So he would basically be like, you have to run without stopping for like, like maybe like a mile and a half, or you'd have to run like a certain speed, like faster, or do like way more push-ups, or do a lot of calisthenics or things like that. He'd like put you in pain during PE. If he was mad at your class, or like if you were kind of slacking in any way, he usually wouldn't make it like he'd yell at you and stuff and get like mad and angry, or he'd just be like, well, you guys are just gonna run for like an hour and a half worth of PE, like, and nobody's allowed to stop or else you're gonna get in trouble or something like that. So it was like stuff like that where it was like, that was his form of punishment. I could also say I don't really think that's fully right, but like whatever. But we would call him the troll. He prided himself on having anger issues and intimidating people. Like, but I remember that time he wasn't like mad. He was just like, I could tell he was disappointed, but he was very judgmental. And I was just like, it kind of led me to be like, these people aren't okay. Like, I even knew, I was like, I learned a lot of ways about how to not treat people by being in the church. That definitely taught me. I was like, this is wrong. To treat kids like that is wrong. To, have anger issues with people, that's wrong. It's just bad. Like, certain things I learned just from being around so many different types of people, where I was like, this is wrong. It's wrong to like live your life this one way, and now you're like over here trying to like preach to other people to do this or that, and being like hypocritical. It's wrong to kick your dog, pastor. We all saw you kick your dog. It's like, it's wrong, certain of these things were just like wrong, that people were doing. And I still see them online on social media these days, on Facebook, ranting and raving about political things. And, a lot of these people, I'm like, you know, I kind of caught on to it when I was in my teens. And a lot of these people, they still have that, that negative, you know, way of being, to where they're not okay. They're not okay in their minds. They think they're good. They think they're doing well. They think they're, you know, promoting health and happiness and wellness or whatever, but they don't really see that, they're causing a lot of problems for some people. And yeah, I mean, like overall, I really had fun with that experience, but there were some experiences that stuck out with people who were kind of like getting really judgy about stuff, and kind of just like, you still can't be good enough. Even if you're trying to be good, there's still going to be people that or judging you about you still not being perfect, um, or want to try to call you out on different stuff and like call you out on your flaws and imperfections, you know. Um, and not really noticing their own flaws or imperfections and like, okay, well, you're abusive to kids, but you know, nobody's telling you that. But I mean, there were a lot of, I did come across quite a few abusive adults. They wouldn't say that they were, but they were. They were not okay. There were a lot of unfit people that were watching our kids, watching. I mean, we're all like in our 40s and 30s now, but like there were a lot of people that when we were in our teens, they were in charge of us, and they did not do a very good job. I said it before. There were a couple of teachers dating students. Disgusting. Even if one of them might have been 18, one of the students might have been 18. I can't confirm that. I hope he was, but that's still too young. He was still in my grade, which was somewhere between like 6th grade and probably ninth or 10th grade. I don't remember what time period this came at, but I think he was between 6th and 10th. But about one of those school years, him and one of the teachers was involved with one another. There was a computer teacher that was from outside. I don't know if he was a church person. This female teacher with the male student, she was a church lady. This and people, friends of mine, close friends of mine, saw them making out in a cave at this backpacking trip or rock climbing trip or wherever we were at Rock and Water. There was this cave where some of us were waiting in line in this cave to go do rappelling or rock climbing or whatever we were doing. And you know, one of my friends saw them and turned around and kind of said it to like one of her friends. It was really quiet, a really quiet friend of hers. But this other, you know, that gossipy loud girl, the same one who called me out and got me in trouble for the profanity in the yearbooks, she went and called out this other girl. She went and called out my friend and was like, "Oh, like you saw them kissing," and like she went and like made sure everybody knew, so everybody found out about it. Everybody found out about it because that other girl kind of blasted it out to everyone verbally. We didn't have like social media back then, so this was all happening in real time. Um, and my friend got kind of reprimanded, um, and was very upset. It was, you know, but a lot of us were like, why would she lie? Like, and we saw them flirting in class all day, and we got to skip lessons because they were like flirting. Like the teachers were like flirting. This teacher was flirting with the student, and like, I mean, it's not fair to the student, but I guess he told her a lie, saying he was part of some band, and when he was out of town for like a week or some amount of time, that he said he was touring with this band. It was like this Mexican band or Spanish language group called MDO. And this teacher went in front of chapel and told the whole chapel that this guy was part of this band, and let's hear his music. And so she played some of the music for one of the classes, of us older students, and one of the students was like, "Oh, that's MDO." Like they knew the band because they were like a Spanish speaking student who was into Spanish language music, and it was like some kind of pop group. And then we're like, "Oh, he lied to her," and like she was into him because her husband was in like he was like a music engineer or something and connected with music. And I guess this guy had like lied and said that he was like some child singer or something, and she believed him, and it was supposed to be his secret, and she went and told the whole school. So stuff like that, where it's like, even if he was lying, she shouldn't have been having like secret conversations with him, or like, I don't know if he came over to her house or what, but like they clearly had some kind of relationship that the rest of the students didn't have. I don't think he was getting better grades because of it. I just think they were just flirting in class, and like always giggling over her desk, and like we didn't have certain lessons certain days because they were too busy flirting, and we weren't gonna complain. We saw it, but we're like, who's gonna say anything? Like, we don't care. And he was like the oldest of us students, and so we kind of just left him alone. Like, he was nice to all of us though, but I really think he was like almost 20 or something, because he never matured the whole time we were there. Like, you go when you're in like 6th grade to 10th grade, like you go through a lot of change puberty wise, and he stayed the same age, same height, everything. Like, he was fully mature from the same amount of maturity from when I met him in 6th grade to when I stopped ever seeing him again after like 10th grade. Like, so he basically never looked older or anything. And I remember he would like kill us at sports. Like, he would kick the ball so hard in soccer, like we would part ways. Like, we would part like the freaking Red Sea. Like, we would get out of his way. Like, we were like, we don't want to be in his way, because he was like so much stronger. His muscle mass and like speed and everything was like, he was like a grown man. But I don't know how old he really was. I think they just let him go because, it's a religious school. They can let you do anything. So I do kind of think he was older, but I don't think we'll ever really know what his age really was. But he was in my class, in my grade. We were told he was a couple years older than us, but I think he was actually older than what we were told. But either way, like, it was still a teacher taking advantage of a student. I don't care how old he really was. Even if he was 25 years old, it was still the dynamic, and still, like, our impression and what we were being told is that he was a kid like us. So, um, but I don't know. Stuff like that happening was very just disgusting. Um, and, a lot of these other adults knew this was happening. Like this teacher that called me out knew that this female teacher was like messing around with this student, and like, everyone kind of knew about it. So I don't know. There were all these crazy experiences with these different types of religious people, and not all of it was bad, but these are just some of the things that I remember when I'm just like that's probably why it was so heavy, because I'm just thinking, like, I don't remember this being a bad experience, but now I remember that. I forgot all about that part about when I got in trouble, where there was like not really a lot of understanding about that. My parents kind of brushed it off, so I was glad that they didn't really care. But like, no one really brought it up in my house. But for a teacher to be talking about your home life, and to be kind of like talking about your spirituality, and then also trying to bring it up with other adults, it's kind of like, that's just disgusting to me. But I don't know. Like, I think that's none of their business. It's not really something that they're supposed to bring up. I'm like, who are you? You're my math teacher. Like, you're my PE teacher. Like, who are you? He did teach some of our Bible classes, but he wasn't a pastor even. He didn't have any like church rankings. Like, maybe he was a deacon, I don't really know, but we didn't really have like a whole like deacon category. Like, we had people that took offering and were deacons in the church, but they weren't like super recognized to the point where, I mean, I'm pretty sure he might have been a deacon. There were some people that we knew that were deacons, but their roles were more subtle. Like, they were kind of more like the caretakers of the church, kind of like the eyes and ears of the church. Like, they kind of knew kind of what was going on, and could give like spiritual guidance to people, but it was like, a lot of times it was not. They would kind of just get in everybody's business, but everyone from church was kind of like that too. Like, everybody was like overly involved with other people's problems, and like, I think the churches just breed that type of environment, because and I wish that I knew how to really understand it better, because it's like, whenever people are kind of like competing with one another for like any kind of status, there's going to be that jealousy there. There's going to be that like, ooh, let me like call out your problems and let me make you look worse and all that kind of stuff. But when it's in a religious environment too, it's like, it's just really, I think it just breeds that type of negative environment. It just breeds those type of people to be able to do that kind of stuff. And it wasn't like the worst experience of my life or anything. Like I barely even remember it, but it's like there were a lot of times like that where like it was times like that where I stopped really thinking about the church in the way that I was taught to think about it. When we started getting like ultra religious and challenging everything, when we're like, okay, like if we're trying to do good and be better, and then we're seeing all this other stuff around us that's like not really good or not really better, or these adults that aren't, nice to their kids, or these adults that aren't nice to each other, or who are causing a lot of conflict, and like, yeah, we started calling out a bunch of stuff, and they didn't really like that. Maybe I had said something in the past that was like against him, and he kind of like caught me off guard, and now was like lashing out at me. I have no idea what, because I never had a conversation with him like that before or after, and I honestly wasn't ever really getting in trouble with him. Like I never really sat down in front of him in trouble with him before, and that was like the only time I ever remember getting in trouble with him, even though I was always doing all kinds of things, but like he kind of just let me just be. Like he never was really like too strict on me about all these other kind of things. That was the only time I remember him ever being like, trying to call me out on something. And I never really said anything, but I was kind of like, yeah, he's wrong. The way he's doing this is wrong. This isn't okay. But also, I didn't want to get in trouble, so I was like, well, I kind of realized, I was like, well, I'm not really getting in trouble with the school. I'm not really getting in trouble with my parents, and so we just kind of like, I'm like, as long as it's just gonna go under the rug, and it's just like a mistake that I made, and they made me feel bad about it, like, let's just leave it at that. I'm not gonna like blow it up into some other thing and like keep bringing it up to the point where like now I'm gonna be in trouble. But I definitely knew that that was wrong, and I was like, you know, that was wrong. There were many experiences that were like that. Not that type of thing, but like a lot of experiences to where I look back and I'm like, the way this was handled by church or by these elders or whatever you want to call these like church people that like to pretend like they're extra perfect, who none of us was perfect, but the way they like to portray themselves, I was like, these people are in the wrong. Um, so there were a lot of experiences with those types of environments where there was somebody who was just completely wrong, completely in the wrong with the way they were like handling something just because they had power or authority or some kind of position in the church or some kind of position in the school. They kind of throw their weight around a little bit. I noticed that. But also, this was the 90s. People were not ultra conscious about all kinds of things, and people weren't getting psychological help so much back then. Like I wasn't. I would use these kind of like experiences with like pastors and stuff to try to resolve the issues that I knew that I had. But I also knew that it didn't help me. Like the things that they tried to do to try to help me were more harmful. Like I really learned a lot of not trusting people from the church. That's definitely where I got a lot of that from. I kind of realized after a while, like, these people can't really be trusted, especially these adults. They're so hypocritical, and they're not as perfect as they want everyone to seem. And even the kids that were my age that seemed like they were trying to be perfect also weren't perfect. And I learned really well how to fly underneath the radar. I learned how not to get caught. I learned how not to share things with people. I learned how not to have real conversations with people. I learned how to basically be completely fake. I learned how to be very standoffish, but also very social. I learned how to just like float around in social groups and be good with everybody, because like if you're kind of just like on an even playing field with everybody, and you can walk the walk and talk the talk with like every group, it works in your favor because you don't really have enemies. I was never fully a part of one crew. It was like I wasn't only a musician, I was an athlete at the same time. I would be at church all the time, but I also would be smoking pot with the people smoking pot, and like sampling out different drugs and things, and like testing the waters with different types of stuff and different kinds of topics and different types of movies and things that I would learn and consume that were maybe against the church, that the church wouldn't have approved of, like rated R movies and all these kinds of like the Source magazine and BET and rap music and all the stuff I used to consume. The church wouldn't have wanted me listening to Wu-Tang. Like that wasn't something that they would have like approved. I remember when the pastor took a stand against Eminem. He's like, if your kids are listening to Eminem, they shouldn't be allowed to listen to this music or whatever. So yeah, so that's my very, very long. I did go almost 2.5 hours talking about this, but I think I've told the story before even, but there was kind of more to it that I was remembering. This is long, but I'm gonna eat a snack and then take a little break because I'm tired. I've been talking for a long time. But with that, thanks for listening.